My name is Maggie, and on a humid afternoon in June, I learned exactly how ridiculous it can be when a former friend thinks her corporate title makes her superior. It started like any other Tuesday. I was clearing tables at the crowded coffee shop where I had just finished my shift, still in my stained apron and non-slip shoes that squeaked against the polished floor. The lunch rush had been brutal, with customers lined up to the door, and every table filled with business people talking loudly into their phones while I refilled their coffee cups and pretended not to notice when they snapped their fingers to get my attention. Elena, my old college friend, was waiting for me at a corner booth near the window, her designer purse strategically placed on the table, where everyone could see the gold hardware gleaming under the afternoon sun. She had chosen this particular coffee shop deliberately. It was in the heart of the business district where her Morrison Hotels colleagues frequently grabbed their afternoon caffeine fix. She gestured dismissively at my uniform, her manicured nails catching the light as she waved her hand like she was shooing away an annoying insect. Then she leaned in close, her voice a practiced corporate whisper that was deliberately loud enough for her friends at the next table to hear every calculated word. "You'll always be just a waitress, Maggie," she said with a smirk that didn't reach her cold blue eyes. "Some people are born for bigger things. You're not one of them." Her friends giggled behind their hands, the sound sharp and cruel in the afternoon air. I stayed calm and simply nodded, picking up the dirty mugs from her table with hands that trembled slightly from anger, not nervousness. The ceramic was still warm from the coffee she'd barely touched. An $8 latte she'd ordered just to have something to hold while delivering her verdict on my life. But I knew her words were a public execution disguised as coffee between old friends, performed for an audience that would spread the story through their social circles like wildfire. I just didn't expect it would take exactly 2 years to prove her completely and spectacularly wrong. Let me take you back to our college days at State University, before Elena's promotion to regional manager at Morrison Hotels changed everything between us. We were both enrolled in the hospitality management program, sharing late-night study sessions in the library and dreaming about the restaurants we'd own someday. Back then Maggie was different, ambitious, yes, but not cruel. We'd spend hours sketching floor plans for imaginary restaurants, debating whether exposed brick or painted walls created better ambience, arguing over wine pairings and menu layouts with the passion only 20-year-olds could muster. But while I was filling notebooks with detailed business plans, calculating food costs and profit margins in my cramped dorm room, I was focused on climbing the corporate ladder. She believed that success came from corner offices and designer blazers, not from the messy hands-on work I genuinely loved. She'd roll her eyes when I talked about working in actual restaurants to learn the business from the ground up, insisting that real professionals started in management training programs. I thought our paths were just different approaches to the same goal. I was wrong. Elena started to see my passion for the service industry not as a strength, but as a weakness that embarrassed her by association. After her promotion to regional manager, she began to distance herself from our friendship, adopting an air of superiority that grew stronger with each corporate achievement. She'd forget to invite me to parties with her new colleagues, claiming they wouldn't understand someone who chose to work in restaurants. The day she sabotaged my relationship with David, my fiancé at the time, I realized her ambition wasn't about her own success. It was about feeling superior to everyone else. She had convinced him that I lacked ambition, that my dreams of opening a restaurant were unrealistic fantasies that would hold him back in his own career. David, weak-willed and easily influenced, broke off our engagement 3 weeks before our wedding, leaving me with a dress I'd saved 6 months to buy and deposits I'd never get back. The day of the coffee shop confrontation was no accident. Elena had specifically invited me to meet her during the busiest part of the afternoon shift, knowing her former college sorority sisters would be occupying the table next to ours. She wanted an audience for my humiliation, witnesses who would carry the story back to their own professional circles. The coffee shop was packed with the kind of people Elena desperately wanted to impress. Young professionals in expensive suits, checking their phones and discussing mergers and acquisitions in voices loud enough to demonstrate their importance. She took a slow sip of her $8 latte and began to systematically dismantle my life with the precision of a surgeon. "You're 26 years old and you're still cleaning up other people's messes," she said, her voice dripping with condescension as she gestured toward the dirty dishes I'd been clearing. Most people our age have figured out how to build careers, not just collect tips. She even brought up my recent breakup with David, claiming I couldn't even keep that together because I'd been too focused on impossible dreams instead of reality. According to Elena, my engagement to David was probably the best thing that could have happened to me because it forced me to face the truth about my limitations. The women at the neighboring table weren't even pretending not to listen anymore. They leaned forward, their eyes bright with the cruel entertainment of watching someone else's humiliation unfold in real time. One of them actually took out her phone, pretending to check messages while clearly recording Elena's performance. I wanted to defend myself, to tell her about the business plans I'd been developing, about the culinary courses I was taking at night, about the money I'd been saving despite my meaningless job. But the words died in my throat, strangled by the public nature of her attack and the weight of months of self-doubt. I felt like I was watching my own execution, powerless to stop the blade from falling. Walking home that day with Elena's words echoing in my ears like a broken record, I was completely devastated. I cried harder than I had since David left, my tears mixing with the humid summer air as I trudged through the streets in my stained uniform. My small studio apartment felt suffocating when I finally reached it, the walls closing in on me as her voice replayed in my mind on an endless loop. Maybe she was right. Maybe I would always be just a waitress, cleaning up other people's messes while they built real careers and real lives. The restaurant industry was brutal, with failure rates that would terrify any sane person. Most new restaurants closed within their first year, and even successful ones operated on razor-thin margins that could disappear with a single bad review or economic downturn. But as I lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling and listening to the sounds of traffic outside my window, something shifted inside me. Not just anger, but a cold determination I'd never felt before. Elena thought she knew my limits, thought she could predict my future based on my current circumstances. She had no idea about the notebook filled with restaurant concepts and business plans I'd been developing for 3 years, hidden under my mattress like a teenager's diary. That's when I realized Elena had made a crucial mistake. She had underestimated me completely. I decided to stop playing nice and start playing smart. The humiliation was the catalyst I needed to transform my fantasies into concrete action. I pulled out that notebook and spread its contents across my tiny kitchen table, studying my own handwriting like it contained the secrets of the universe. While Elena was busy climbing someone else's corporate ladder, I was quietly learning an entire industry from the ground up, gaining knowledge she couldn't buy with her MBA or her designer wardrobe. Every slow night at Romano's, where I'd been working double shifts to make ends meet, I studied the restaurant operation like I was earning a master's degree in real-world business management. I learned about food costs and waste reduction, about inventory management and supplier relationships. I watched how the kitchen operated during rush periods, noting which systems worked and which ones created bottlenecks that cost money and frustrated customers. I studied successful restaurants in our area with the intensity of a military strategist, figuring out what made them special and profitable. I analyzed their menus, their pricing strategies, their customer service approaches. I even drove to other cities on my days off, eating at restaurants that had received national attention, taking notes on everything from their interior design to their staff training methods. I was no longer just angry at Elena's words. I was strategic, focused, and absolutely determined to prove her wrong in the most public way possible. I would use my unique knowledge and position to build something Elena could never have. A business built on passion and expertise, not corporate politics and empty networking. My plan was to build my success right under her nose, where she couldn't miss it but couldn't stop it either. I started with a food cart, using every penny of my savings and tips to secure the necessary permits and equipment. The application process was a nightmare of bureaucratic red tape, but I navigated it with the same determination I'd once reserved for college exams. My location was strategically chosen. In the business district where Elena worked, close enough that she would eventually notice, but far enough that she wouldn't immediately connect it to me. The cart was tiny, barely big enough for me and a small commercial-grade grill, but it was mine. Every piece of equipment had been carefully selected, and every recipe had been tested dozens of times in my apartment kitchen, until it was perfect. I made everything fresh and with restaurant-level quality, that put most established places to shame. The prices were accessible to working people who appreciated good food, but couldn't afford fine dining every day. My breakfast sandwiches were made with artisanal bread and locally sourced eggs. My lunch offerings included gourmet burgers and hand-cut fries that I prepared at dawn each morning, before wheeling my cart into position. I would sometimes see Elena walking to work in her expensive suits, talking loudly on her phone about budget meetings and performance metrics, but she never noticed the woman behind the food cart who was building an empire one customer at a time. I had allies who didn't even know they were helping me. My regular customers, the office workers who started lining up before I'd even finished setting up, the local food bloggers who were about to change my life forever. Within 2 months, something incredible happened that exceeded even my most optimistic projections. I was making more money from the cart than I'd ever earned at Romano's, even working double shifts. Lines of customers stretched around the block during rush hours, with people waiting 30 minutes for food they could have gotten elsewhere in 5 minutes. The quality of my food and the warmth of my genuine customer service were creating something restaurant consultants call customer evangelism. People who don't just buy your product but actively promote it to everyone they know. Local food bloggers discovered me, writing glowing reviews about the hidden gem on wheels that was serving restaurant-quality food from a cart. The online attention was intoxicating, with photos of my food appearing on Instagram and Facebook feeds across the city. Complete strangers were tagging their friends in posts about my breakfast sandwiches, and food photographers were asking permission to feature my cart in their portfolios. I kept my success a secret from everyone who knew Elena, understanding instinctively that surprise would be my greatest weapon. This wasn't just a food cart anymore. It was a viral sensation in the making, proof that genuine passion and hard work could triumph over corporate titles and condescending attitudes. My quiet preparations were finally paying off in a very public way, and Elena remained completely oblivious to what was happening 8 blocks from her office. The real breakthrough came on a crisp morning in October when my ex-fiancé, David, showed up at my cart with a shocked expression on his face. He'd been following the food blogger coverage and was genuinely amazed to discover that his former fiancé, the one with no ambition according to Elena, was running the most popular food cart in the business district. "Maggie, I had no idea you were capable of something like this," he said, ordering a breakfast sandwich with obvious amazement in his voice. "This is incredible. You've built something really amazing here." His tone was a mixture of regret and newfound respect, the voice of a man realizing he'd made a terrible mistake. I smiled politely and took his money, treating him exactly like any other customer despite the emotional history between us. I knew the irony wasn't lost on him. He was recognizing my potential now that other people were talking about it, after having dismissed my dreams just months earlier when they mattered most. His visible shock and regret were proof that I was on the right path, validation that my success was real and undeniable. He had chosen to listen to Elena's assessment of my character instead of trusting his own knowledge of who I was, but now he was seeing the consequences of his poor judgment firsthand. The woman he'd abandoned for being unrealistic was building something extraordinary, while he remained stuck in the same entry-level marketing job he'd had when we were engaged. 6 months after that humiliating coffee shop encounter, I quit my job at Romano's with 2 weeks' notice and a sense of satisfaction that bordered on euphoria. My food cart had become so successful that I'd hired 2 part-time employees and was seriously considering a second location. The original cart was generating more profit than many established restaurants, with customers pre-ordering their meals through a simple website I'd built myself. The city paper ran a front-page lifestyle story titled, "From Waitress to Entrepreneur. Local woman builds food empire one cart at a time." The photograph showed me smiling confidently in my Haven-branded apron, surrounded by loyal customers who had become genuine friends. My mother called crying when she saw it, saying she'd always known I was destined for something special, but had worried that other people's opinions might convince me otherwise. While my public profile was rising like a rocket, Elena's corporate world was beginning to crumble in ways she couldn't control or prevent. Morrison Hotels was going through the review led to reservations booking 3 weeks in advance, with potential customers calling multiple times hoping for cancellations. Food Network called about featuring us on a show about rising restaurant stars, and culinary magazines wanted to interview me about my journey from food cart to acclaimed restaurant. The transformation from waitress to celebrated chef felt surreal, but I had earned every moment of recognition through years of doubt, struggle, and relentless determination. This was more than just a successful restaurant. It was a public vindication that proved Elena's words about me being just a waitress were completely and spectacularly wrong. My success brought opportunities I'd never imagined possible. Within 6 months, I owned the entire building where Haven was located, creating both security for my restaurant and passive income from renting the upper floors to young professionals who appreciated the vibrant neighborhood I was helping to revitalize. The same week I signed the building purchase agreement, I heard through our network of mutual friends that Elena had moved back in with her parents after burning through her savings during 8 months of unsuccessful job searching. The second Haven location opened in the Arts District 18 months later, larger and more sophisticated than the original, but maintaining the same warm atmosphere that had made the first location successful. We employed 30 people across both locations, offering above-average wages and comprehensive benefits that included health insurance and paid vacation time. Many of my employees had started in entry-level positions and worked their way up through dedication and skill development, embodying the same journey I had taken from waitress to restaurant owner. The ultimate validation came when Haven won 3 local restaurant awards in the same year: Best New Restaurant, Best Comfort Food, and Chef of the Year. Standing on that stage at the awards ceremony, holding the Chef of the Year trophy while cameras flashed and the audience of industry professionals applauded, I thought about Elena and wondered if she was watching the local news coverage from her childhood bedroom. The girl who had been publicly humiliated for her dreams was now a celebrated chef and entrepreneur, featured in magazines and respected by peers who had once dismissed the service industry as beneath their notice. A reporter from the local news station asked me, "What's next for Haven and Chef Martinez?" I smiled confidently into the camera and said, "We're expanding nationally. This is just the beginning of something much bigger." I knew Elena was probably watching the coverage, still job searching and dealing with rejection letters. As her own career had become a distant memory, the awards weren't just recognition for my restaurants. They were a public declaration of my complete and total victory over everyone who had underestimated me. My national expansion was not just a dream, but a carefully planned next phase of my strategic vision. Investors approached me about franchising Haven, impressed by our financial performance and brand recognition that had spread far beyond our local market. A major publisher offered me a cookbook deal with a 6-figure advance, wanting to capture the recipes and story that had made Haven a success. Food Network wanted to develop a television show around my journey from waitress to restaurateur, seeing ratings potential in my underdog story. But what excited me most was the opportunity to purchase not just my building, but the entire block where Haven was located. The area was gentrifying rapidly, and owning multiple properties would give me control over my restaurant's environment, while generating substantial passive income that would fund further expansion. The bank was eager to work with me, viewing my expansion plans as a sure bet based on Haven's proven track record and my reputation for sound business decisions. Within 2 years of opening, I owned 6 properties and was generating more monthly passive income than Elena had ever made in her corporate job. Even at her peak, the girl she'd dismissed as just a waitress was building a real estate portfolio while creating jobs and revitalizing an entire neighborhood. My success was a systematic dismantling of every prediction she had made about my life, proof that her judgment had been not just wrong but spectacularly misguided. Elena's life, in contrast, was defined by stagnation and mounting failures. The corporate world she had worshipped had cast her aside without ceremony, leaving her with no income, no prospects, and no one to blame but herself for the bridges she'd burned and the people she'd dismissed along the way. I have a beautiful office now, a space above the original Haven with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the street where I had started with nothing but a food cart and a dream. The walls were decorated with framed reviews, photos with celebrity chefs who had visited the restaurant, and the 3 awards that represented industry recognition of my achievements. I was reviewing architectural plans for our 3rd location when my assistant knocked on the door with a confused expression. "There's someone here about a job," she said uncertainly, glancing back toward the stairs. She has management experience in hospitality, but she seems really desperate. She's been waiting for 2 hours even though I told her we're not hiring managers right now. She insists she needs to speak with you personally, says it's urgent, and she won't leave until she talks to the owner. A cold wave of recognition washed over me like ice water, followed immediately by a surge of anticipation that made my heart race. I gestured for my assistant to send her up, not looking up from the blueprints spread across my mahogany desk. My moment of ultimate vindication had finally arrived, exactly as I had always known it would. When I finally looked up from my desk, the pen fell from my hand and clattered onto the hardwood floor with a sound that seemed to echo in the sudden silence. Elena stood in my doorway, looking nothing like the polished, confident woman who had humiliated me 2 years earlier. Her clothes were clean but clearly chosen for economy rather than style. A simple black dress from a discount retailer, sensible flats instead of designer heels, and a purse that had seen better days. Most striking were her eyes. The arrogant certainty that had defined her personality was completely gone, replaced by barely controlled desperation, and the hollow look of someone who had been rejected too many times to maintain hope. She stood there speechless, her mouth slightly open as her eyes took in my office. The awards on the walls, the photos with celebrity chefs, the architectural plans for expansion, the expensive furniture that spoke of success and stability. All of it was evidence of the success she had never believed was possible for me, proof that her assessment of my potential had been not just wrong but laughably inadequate. For a long moment neither of us spoke. The silence stretched between us like a taut wire, filled with the weight of everything that had happened since our last encounter. I could see her trying to process what she was seeing, struggling to reconcile the successful businesswoman sitting behind the mahogany desk with the defeated waitress she had dismissed so cruelly. "Elena," I said finally, keeping my voice neutral despite the emotional earthquake happening inside me. "This is unexpected." My tone was perfectly controlled, professional but not warm, exactly the voice I used with vendors who were trying to overcharge me. Her voice was a fragile whisper that barely carried across the room. "I don't understand," she said, her hands trembling slightly as she gestured helplessly around my office. "The receptionist said the owner wanted to meet with me about a management position. But you're..." She trailed off, unable to process what she was seeing. "I'm what?" I asked, leaning back in my leather chair with the confidence of someone who held all the power in the conversation. "Just a waitress." The words hung in the air like smoke from an explosion, and I watched Elena's face flush red as the memory of that coffee shop humiliation crashed over her like a physical blow. I gestured calmly to the chair across from my desk, the same gesture I used with important investors and food critics. "Please sit down. You came here looking for a job, didn't you? Let's talk about that." My voice was calm and controlled, but inside, I felt a satisfaction so pure and complete it was almost intoxicating. This was the moment I had been building toward for 2 years, the ultimate vindication that would prove once and for all that Elena's judgment had been spectacularly wrong. Elena sat down slowly, her hands trembling as she placed her resume on my desk with the careful precision of someone handling explosives. The paper was crisp and professionally formatted, but I could see it had been printed at home on standard copy paper rather than the expensive cardstock she had once used, a small detail that spoke volumes about how far she had fallen. "I had no idea," she said quietly, her voice filled with genuine shock. "Haven, both locations, this is all yours?" The question hung in the air like a confession of her own failure to understand who I really was. "Both locations, plus I own this entire building and 3 others on this block," I replied calmly, letting the magnitude of my success sink in. "And we're opening our 3rd location next month in the capital, with plans for national expansion by the end of next year." I could see her doing desperate calculations in her head, trying to reconcile the successful businesswoman in front of her with the defeated waitress she had once dismissed so publicly. The cognitive dissonance was almost painful to watch, like seeing someone's entire worldview crumble in real time. I kept my voice neutral and professional as I asked her about her departure from Morrison Hotels, though we both knew the answer. Her professional facade crumbled as she admitted that her entire region had been eliminated during corporate restructuring, And she'd been out of work for 14 months despite having what she'd once considered impressive credentials. "I've had to significantly lower my expectations," she admitted, her voice cracking with the strain of maintaining composure. "I've gained a lot of respect for people in service industries over the past year. I realize I may have been judgmental in the past about careers I didn't fully understand." The understatement was so massive it was almost comical. I leaned forward slightly, my voice still calm but with an edge that cut through her careful euphemisms like a knife. "Have you ever told someone they should accept their limitations? That they weren't cut out for bigger things?" She went pale, understanding immediately that I was referring to our coffee shop encounter. The color drained from her face, as she realized that her moment of cruel triumph had become the foundation for my spectacular success. "Maggie, I am so incredibly sorry," she said, tears forming in her eyes. "I was arrogant, cruel, and completely wrong about everything. About you, about what constitutes real success, about the value of hard work versus corporate politics." She even admitted to influencing David's decision to break up with me, claiming she had thought she was protecting him from making a mistake, but now realized she had destroyed something genuine for the sake of her own twisted sense of superiority. I picked up her resume and slid it back across the desk to her with deliberate slowness, the paper making a soft whisper against the polished wood. "I'm not here to offer you a job, Elena. I brought you up here to accept your apology, but an apology doesn't fix a broken career or undo the damage you've done to your own life." I stood up and walked to the window, looking down at the street where my success story had begun with a simple food cart and an unshakable determination to prove her wrong. "The position you're looking for, the person you used to be, doesn't exist here. There's no place for someone with your values in my company or in my life." 2 years later, I'm sitting in my office at the flagship Haven location, reviewing quarterly reports that show we're exceeding all projections across our 5 locations. My restaurant group employs over 100 people, has been featured in national magazines, and has a waiting list for franchise opportunities that stretches into next year. The cookbook became a bestseller, and the Food Network show just got renewed for a second season. Elena eventually found work at a chain restaurant in a different city, a job that requires her to wear a uniform and serve customers who probably remind her daily of the person she once was. She never received another management position, and according to mutual friends, she lost her remaining savings in a failed business venture that she started out of desperation rather than passion. I occasionally see updates about her continued struggles on social media, but I don't gloat or feel satisfaction anymore. I don't need to. The best revenge isn't destroying your enemies. It's building something beautiful from the ashes of their betrayal, and living so well that their opinions become completely irrelevant. The girl who was told she'd always be just a waitress became the woman who proved that extraordinary things come from the most ordinary beginnings, that passion and determination can triumph over prejudice and cruelty, and that sometimes the people who underestimate you are giving you the greatest gift possible, the motivation to prove them spectacularly wrong.
If this story got you thinking, go ahead and hit that like button. Don't forget to subscribe for more real stories that hit deep, and tap the bell so you don't miss what's coming next. And hey, if you know someone who needs to hear this